The rain hammered against the cracked window of Rosie's diner as 12-year-old. Marcus pressed his face against the glass, watching families laugh over steaming plates of food. His stomach growled so loudly he was certain everyone inside could hear it. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, not since his mother had been rushed to the hospital, and the meager contents of their refrigerator had run out. The foster system hadn't caught up with him yet, and he was determined to keep it that way. But hunger, he was learning, was a beast that couldn't be outrun. Marcus had walked past this diner every day for 3 years on his way to school. He knew every crack in the sidewalk, every flickering letter in the neon sign that read, Rosie's Home Cooking Since 1987. He'd never once stepped inside. Places like that weren't for kids like him. Kids whose shoes had holes in them and whose jackets were 2 sizes too small. But today, something was different. Today, desperation had finally overpowered pride. The bell above the door chimed as Marcus pushed it open, and suddenly every eye in the place seemed to turn toward him. His cheeks burned. He must have looked like exactly what he was, a street kid with nowhere else to go. He was about to turn around and leave when a voice called out from behind the counter. You gonna stand there all day, sweetheart, or you gonna sit down? The woman speaking was probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. Her name tag read Rosie in faded letters. She didn't look at him with pity or suspicion, just simple acknowledgement, as if hungry kids wandered into her establishment every day. Marcus shuffled to the nearest booth and slid into the cracked vinyl seat. He stared at the laminated menu, his eyes skimming over prices he couldn't afford. Pancakes, $5. Burger and fries, $8.50. He had 73 cents in his pocket, money he'd found in the couch cushions at home before the landlord had locked them out. Rosie appeared at his table with a glass of water and a patient smile. What can I get you, hun? Marcus's throat tightened. I don't have much money, just... He pulled the coins from his pocket and laid them on the table, his hand trembling slightly. Rosie didn't even glance at the money. Looks like you're in luck. We have a special today. Chef's choice, completely free for our most important customers. I'm not important, Marcus whispered. Everybody who walks through that door is important, Rosie said firmly. Now you like eggs? Bacon? Toast? Marcus could only nod, afraid that if he tried to speak, he might cry. 20 minutes later, a plate appeared in front of him loaded with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, hash browns, and toast slathered with butter. Marcus stared at it for a long moment before picking up his fork with shaking hands. He tried to eat slowly to savor it, but hunger took over and he devoured the meal in minutes. When he finished, Rosie came back and set down a slice of apple pie. Can't leave without dessert, she said with a wink. That day changed everything. Marcus returned the next morning and the morning after that. Each time Rosie fed him without question, without judgment, without asking for anything in return. She learned his name, learned about his situation, learned that he was sleeping in the abandoned building 2 blocks over. She never called social services, never tried to force help on him. She just fed him day after day, giving him the one thing he needed most, a reason to keep going. Weeks turned into months. Marcus started arriving earlier, helping Rosie set up before the morning rush. He'd wipe down tables, refill napkin dispensers, sweep the floors. He didn't want to be a charity case. Rosie let him help, understanding that dignity was sometimes more important than food. The other regulars got to know him too. There was Mr. Patterson, the retired postman who always ordered black coffee and wheat toast. There was Sandra, the night shift nurse who stopped by for breakfast after her long shifts. They'd nod at Marcus, include him in their conversations, treat him like he belonged. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like part of something. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late November, a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner. Marcus was clearing tables when a man in an expensive suit walked in, his shoes so polished they reflected the fluorescent lights. Everything about him screamed money, the watch on his wrist, the cut of his clothing, the way he carried himself with absolute confidence. The man sat at the counter, and Marcus noticed Rosie's eyes widened slightly before she composed herself and approached with her usual warm smile. What can I get you? Coffee, black, and whatever you recommend for breakfast, the man said, his voice clipped and professional. He was already pulling out his phone, clearly planning to work through the meal. Rosie brought him the special, her famous Eggs Benedict with a side of fruit. The man ate mechanically, barely looking up from his screen. Marcus watched him curiously. People like this didn't usually come to Rosie's. This was a place for regular folks, working people, not men who wore watches that probably cost more than a car. As the man was finishing his meal, a commotion erupted near the door. A woman had collapsed, her face pale and sweating. "Someone call 911!" Sandra, the nurse, was already kneeling beside her, checking her pulse. Without thinking, Marcus ran to the back and grabbed the first aid kit he'd seen. Rosie used dozens of times. He brought it to Sandra, who nodded approvingly. "Good thinking, kid." The man in the suit had stood up, phone already in hand. But he wasn't calling 911, he was filming. Marcus felt a flash of anger. Who recorded someone else's emergency? But then the man lowered his phone and did something unexpected. He knelt down beside Sandra and said, "I'm trained in CPR. What do you need?" Together, Sandra and the stranger worked on the woman until the paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. The woman was stable, conscious, and would be fine. As she was loaded into the ambulance, Sandra shook the man's hand. "You might have saved her life." The man shrugged. "Just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would," Sandra said quietly. After the excitement died down, the man returned to his seat at the counter. Rosie refilled his coffee without a word. He stared into the cup for a long moment before speaking. "How much do I owe you?" $12.50, Rosie said. The man pulled out his wallet and laid a $100 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." Rosie raised an eyebrow. "That's generous, but it's not enough," the man interrupted. He was looking around the diner now, really seeing it for the first time. The cracked vinyl booths, the outdated equipment, the leak in the corner that Rosie had been putting a bucket under for months. "How long have you been running this place?" 37 years, Rosie said with a hint of pride. "Took it over from my father." "And business is good?" Rosie hesitated. "We get by." The man nodded slowly. Then his eyes landed on Marcus, who was pretending to wipe down a table while eavesdropping shamelessly. "That boy. He works here?" "Marcus helps out sometimes," Rosie said carefully, her voice taking on a protective edge. "Does he go to school?" "When he can." The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and walked over to Marcus's table. Up close, Marcus could see that his eyes, though serious, weren't unkind. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus." His voice came out stronger than he expected. "I'm Robert Chen. I own a tech company downtown." He paused. "I've been watching you work this morning." "You're efficient, respectful. And you jumped in to help during that emergency without being asked. How old are you?" 13. "Almost 14. Robert nodded slowly. Then he turned back to Rosie. "I'd like to speak with you privately, if you have a moment." They disappeared into Rosie's tiny office in the back. Marcus tried to go back to work, but his hands were shaking. Had he done something wrong? Was this man going to report him to authorities? 20 minutes later, they emerged. Rosie's eyes were red as if she'd been crying, but she was smiling wider than Marcus had ever seen. Robert approached him again. "Marcus, Rosie tells me you've been living on the streets. That you're not currently in school because you're avoiding the foster system." Marcus's heart sank. This was it. This was where his lucky streak ended. "I want to make you an offer," Robert continued. "I'm setting up a scholarship fund in your name. Full ride to any school you want to attend, all the way through college. Room and board included. But there's a condition." Marcus held his breath. "You have to let me help you find a safe place to live. A real home. And you have to promise me that you'll pay this forward someday. When you're in a position to help someone else the way Rosie helped you." Marcus couldn't speak. He looked at Rosie, who nodded encouragingly, tears streaming down her face now. "Why?" Marcus finally managed to choke out. "You don't even know me." Robert's expression softened. 30 years ago, I was you. I was a kid sleeping in subway stations, stealing food to survive. Then one day, a teacher noticed. She didn't call social services. She didn't make a big show of it. She just started bringing me lunch every day. Then she helped me get into a program for at-risk youth. That one act of kindness changed the trajectory of my entire life." He gestured around the diner. "When I walked in here today, I was just looking for coffee. But then I saw you. I saw Rosie. I saw what was happening here. And I realized I'd been given a chance to be that person for someone else, to be the one who changes a life. He held out his hand. So what do you say, Marcus? Are you ready to let someone help you? Marcus looked at that outstretched hand through blurry vision. He thought about all the mornings he'd walked into this diner hungry and left full. He thought about Rosie's kindness, offered freely without expectation. He thought about the man kneeling beside a stranger, using his training to save a life. And he realized that kindness wasn't a weakness. It was the strongest force in the world. Marcus reached out and shook Robert's hand. 5 years later, Marcus stood at a podium in front of 200 people, accepting a scholarship award he'd earned through perfect grades and community service. In the audience, Rosie sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Next to her was Robert Chen, beaming with pride. "I'm here today because someone fed me when I was hungry," Marcus said into the microphone. Not once, but every single day for months. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't want anything in return. She just saw a kid who needed help, and she helped. That's who I want to be. That's who I'm going to be. For every person who feels invisible, who thinks nobody cares, who's lost hope, I see you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you're not forgotten. The audience erupted in applause. But Marcus was looking at Rosie, who smiled at him the same way she had that first day he'd walked into her diner. Like he mattered, like he belonged, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, kindness had been his salvation, and now it would be his legacy.